All right, let's dive into a story from Rich Dad, Poor Dad that really gets to the heart of things. It's all about two completely different ways of thinking about money, work, and building wealth. And it all kicks off with one simple choice. Which dad do you listen to? For generations, this has been the standard playbook for success. It's what our parents told us, and their parents told them. But what if following that advice is the very thing holding you back from real wealth? It's a huge question, and the answer is hidden in the story of two very different fathers. So, meet the two main figures in Robert Kiyosaki's young life. And right away, you can see something's off, right? On one hand, you have his poor dad, a super smart guy with a PhD who, believe it or not, struggled with money his whole life. Then you have Rich Dad, who dropped out of school in the 8th grade, but went on to become one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. So, what on earth did Rich Dad know that Poor Dad didn't?
This right here, this single idea, is the secret sauce. It's the fundamental difference between the two mindsets. We're going to really unpack this because it's not about how much money you make, it's about how you make it. And the story of how a 9-year-old kid figured this out is where it all starts.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1956 in a small sugar plantation town in Hawaii. A 9-year-old Robert Kiyosaki and his best friend Mike are starting to notice something. They look around at the kids of doctors and business owners, and it hits them. They're the poor kids. So Robert does what any kid would do. He goes to the smartest person he knows, his highly educated dad, and he asks him, "Dad, how do I get rich?" And his dad's advice was simple, almost a riddle. Use your head. For two ambitious little boys, that was all the spark they needed.
Taking that advice very, very literally, Robert and Mike decided the most direct path to getting money was, well, to just make it themselves. And this led to their very first, let's call it, business venture.
And you gotta love their hustle. Their idea was brilliant, if a little illegal. They basically launched a neighborhood-wide campaign, going door to door collecting old lead toothpaste tubes. Then they're melting them down over a barbecue and carefully pouring the molten lead into plaster molds. They weren't just thinking about money, they were literally making it, a true garage startup. So they proudly show their shiny new nickels to Poor Dad, who has to gently break the news that their money-making business has another name, counterfeiting. And yeah, that's illegal. But instead of just shutting them down, he did something amazing. He told them, look, if you really want to learn about money, go talk to Mike's dad. This is where the real school of life began. But Rich Dad's classroom, it wasn't a classroom at all. His first lesson wasn't some boring lecture. It was a job offer. A job offer specifically designed to teach them what it really feels like to work for money. And the pay? A whopping 10 cents an hour. I mean, even for 1956, that was basically nothing, and the boys knew it. But Rich Dad's deal was simple. Take the job, and I'll teach you. Walk away, and you learn nothing. So for 3 weeks straight, these 9-year-old kids gave up their Saturday baseball games to spend hours dusting endless shelves of canned goods in a hot, stuffy convenience store. They felt used, they felt underpaid, and worst of all, they weren't learning a single thing about getting rich. Robert was starting to get really angry. And this is just classic Rich Dad. That anger, that feeling of being trapped, of being exploited, that was the lesson. He was giving them a real taste of life, letting them feel exactly what millions of adults feel every single day at their jobs. This was the exact question tearing Robert up inside. He was so ready to quit. But instead of just walking out, he finally stormed in and confronted Rich Dad, demanding answers and a raise. And that moment, that confrontation, is what unlocked the very first secret. That showdown was the whole point. Rich Dad finally sat Robert down to explain the invisible trap that keeps most people running in circles their entire lives, often without even knowing it. He called it the rat race. And we all know this pattern, right? You get up, you go to work to get a paycheck. You pay your bills. Then you want nicer things, so you need a bigger paycheck, which leads to bigger bills. It's a hamster wheel, and it's powered by two very powerful, very human emotions. The first emotion is fear. It's the fear of not being able to pay your rent, of not having enough for food, of drowning in debt. That fear is an incredible motivator. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning and chains you to a job just for that feeling of security from a paycheck. Then, the moment you get that paycheck, the second emotion takes over, desire. You see the new phone, the nicer car, the bigger house, all the doodads, as Rich Dad called them. So you spend your money, and suddenly, the paycheck isn't enough anymore. The fear creeps back in, and boom, the cycle starts all over again. You're right back on the wheel.
So how in the world do you escape the rat race? Well, Rich Dad's next lesson was a total curveball. He wasn't just going to tell them the answer, he was going to make them live it.
He made them a new offer. Keep working, but for $0 an hour. Nothing. Nada. The whole point was to break their mental addiction to a paycheck. He wanted to force their brains to stop thinking about earning money and start seeing opportunities to create money.
And you know what? It totally worked. Once they weren't worried about their tiny wage, their eyes opened up. They noticed the store manager ripping the covers off old comic books and tossing them, so they cut a deal to take the comics for free. Then they built their first real asset, a comic book library in Mike's basement, where neighborhood kids would pay 10 cents to come in and read for as long as they wanted.
And here's the magic part. They hired Mike's sister to run the library and paid her a small commission. So now, money was coming in even when they weren't there. They weren't working for money anymore. They had built a system where money was finally working for them. Lesson number 1, learned.
And just look at these numbers. Their old job paid them a measly 30 cents a week combined. But their new comic book business, that was pulling in an average of $9.50 a week? That's more than 30 times what they were making before. They had built a little money-making machine.
In the end, though, the most valuable thing they got wasn't the $9. It was the knowledge. It was that shift in their thinking. They learned to see the world not as an employee hunting for a paycheck, but as an entrepreneur searching for an opportunity. And that kind of education, that's way more powerful than money itself.
And that brings the whole lesson right back to us, doesn't it? It's a simple question to end on, but it's a deep one. Take a look at your own life, at your own finances. Are you still working for your money, or have you started building things that make your money work for you?